over the next couple of minutes. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us this morning for our webinar on company culture, why it's important, what impacts your business culture, and how it can be shifted. For those who don't know me, my name is Christy Simon, president of the Central Maryland Chamber, and I'm really glad you're here. If you have any questions throughout the program, you can feel free to add them in the chat box. We will be monitoring the chat. We'll also have some time for Q&A at the end, so you're welcome to save your questions as well. And as several of you have done already, we encourage you to add your contact information in the chat box. So that way, following the event, we'll share all of that information with the guests that are here today so you can stay in touch with each other. And now I would like to introduce our speaker for today's presentation. Tammy Good and her company BBSI are members of the Chamber, and their company handles payroll, workers' compensation, human resources, and business consulting services to help businesses prosper. Tammy herself is a business owner advocate with over 15 years of consulting and leadership experience. Tammy's worked with clients on a wide range of topics, including growth strategy, injured worker management, company culture, and organizational development. Tammy holds a leadership position with Barrett Business Services, Inc., a publicly traded company that serves over 7,200 clients nationwide. EHR certified, Tammy holds a master's degree in human resource development from Villanova University and a bachelor's degree in communication from the University of Delaware. Outside the office, Tammy enjoys photography, traveling, and hiking with her golden retrievers, Chase and Gidget. So without further ado, here's Tammy. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. And I want to thank everybody for being here today. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. So one of my favorite topics is company culture. And I love this quote from famous management consultant Peter Drucker, who says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And really let that sink in. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, because I think a lot of times businesses will have these really thoughtful, detailed plans on their strategy and their execution, but they fail to realize the power of culture. And because they don't necessarily understand the dynamics of it all, a lot of times that strategy will go off the rails. So today, everything we're going to talk about is really relevant to no matter what size organization you are. At the end, I will be sprinkling in questions to kind of ask yourself as we kind of go along, so you can kind of assess the current state of your culture. You know, we might have people on this call that think they have, really good culture, and maybe they're just looking to maybe improve on that a little bit or do some things differently. And maybe we've got some folks that are brand new businesses starting out and they're kind of looking to establish that. Or maybe you're just looking overall to enhance your culture. So the stuff we're going to talk about today, relevant to all size companies. You will see me, hear me use, organizations that you're familiar with, just because they're larger, you recognize the brand, right? But realize that, the stuff is really relevant no matter what size organization. So today we're going to cover everything, build on each piece. What is company culture? Why is it important? I don't think anybody's going to say company culture isn't important, but we're going to talk about really the whys behind it, what impacts it, and then really, how can it be shifted? I don't like to say changed, right? I like to use the word shifted. So what is company culture? It really is something that exists in your company's DNA, right? It's shared vision, values, beliefs, that company purpose. It has really become kind of a buzz phrase recently in the last 10 years or so. And I think what's so interesting about company culture is people know when they have it, a good one, and they know when they don't have a great company culture. But I don't think a lot of people think about everything that kind of makes it up, like how is it impacted, right? So we're going to take a deep dive into that today, but it's really your traditions or a general way of doing things. So think of it kind of as it's a group phenomenon, right? It doesn't just live solely in one person in your organization. Kind of acts like a silent language, okay? It really can impact and direct the actions and the thoughts of your team, of your employees. So one of the takeaways I hope you get out of this is that company culture isn't stagnant. Okay, so your current state of company culture, it might not be the same like 6 months from now, 3 years from now, right? So I always encourage people to keep a pulse on their company culture and really take that holistic approach of thinking about company culture in all your process decisions, in your strategy, right? And really taking that holistic approach and keeping a pulse on it as what it is today, where it is tomorrow, 3 years down the road, and so on and so forth. And no, look, one bad hire can shift your company culture. And it doesn't matter, I'll give you an example. I have a friend of mine right now that works at a very large nonprofit. They hired a new CFO, and I can tell you right now, their culture and their company is in turmoil because of that one hire. So it doesn't need to be, sometimes people think, well, if I have a smaller company, really one bad hire can make an impact. Absolutely. But also too, if you're a larger organization, one bad hire can really affect your company culture. So it's not a one size fits all, and really it can't be copied. So every company is going to have their own company culture. Okay. So, maybe you take little pieces here, take little pieces there, but really it's something that should be your own. And should be unique. So I'm going to give you an example. I read an article a couple of years ago, a guy that was on the United Airlines board of directors. And he said when they get to their meetings, the head of the board always says, okay, well, there's the fire extinguisher. There's the exits. Where are the stairs? We're going to meet at this specific place if the building gets evacuated. Why do you guys think that is? It's because safety is such a big part of United Airlines culture, right? So they are conscious, and I challenge you guys to be, really conscious again of how ways can you work in your company culture to different things that you do. So you might not have a board of directors at your organization, but what other activities do you have that you can find something like this to incorporate in? I always say, and I'll stress at the end too, is be the change that you guys want to see. Okay. So trying to figure out different ways to, work your values, your beliefs, what that company culture is into things like this example in a board of directors meeting. Okay. And I will say, it really is a common denominator. Good company culture is a common denominator among successful organizations. But again, to kind of give you an idea, right? The culture, Elon Musk, right? Tesla, SpaceX, he really strives for innovation in his culture, right? He wants to promote innovation because it goes to what they're trying to accomplish. Jeff Bezos, people think Amazon has a good culture. Some people think Amazon doesn't have a good culture, but Jeff Bezos always says, look, it's friendly, but it's intense. And maybe some people aren't suited for that. And we'll talk a little bit later about hiring and how that really impacts the company culture. But, somebody that might be great for REI is not necessarily a great hire for Bank of America, right? It really depends on that culture and really finding those fits. I have friends that work at Amazon and they love it. I have friends at Amazon that I left after a couple months. Okay. So again, really making sure that the folks that you're hiring really seem to be a good fit, for your culture. So why is it important? Like I mentioned earlier, I think nobody's going to say culture isn't important in an organization. Okay. But let's look at some numbers. All right. Let's look at things that drive P&Ls, right? So SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, conducted a survey in 2019 that basically said the cost of poor company culture costs organizations globally $223 billion a year. So, people aren't motivated, right? They're not as efficient. You have retention issues. There's all these things that play into that number, but that's a huge number. So when we talk about retention, right? The old saying, time is money. It's no joke, right? The amount of time that you guys spent posting jobs, interviewing, training, you might have had a person that was 100% efficient. Now you're down to somebody that's 10% efficient, right? So It's easier to keep, you want to keep somebody versus trying to find somebody new. Another hard cost, right? Turnover, taxes, food and soda, right? I mean, think about that. If you have an employee that starts beginning of the year, they work until April, they hit their caps and they leave, and you hire somebody else, well, now you start those taxes all over again. So now you're several hundred more dollars right there, right? So, when people are happy, they stay. And that's a big part of company culture. Promoting cooperation, amongst employees. They really do want to do their best if they're happy, if they have a good company culture. And a lot of times, if you have a good company culture, the employees aren't even really thinking about it. They're happy. And I'll give you an example. I worked for Progressive Insurance for many years, almost 11 years. And it's a company that, they're Fortune 500 company, top 100 employer to work for. And I knew, like, you just know they had a great company culture, the way you felt, the way that the inclusion, and you did your job and you did the best job you possibly could, because it was kind of known, man, I'm working for a great company. So, retention, obviously a big piece right now, obviously the great resignation, right? We're hearing so much about, so retention becomes even harder and more important in the day that we're currently living in. If you talk about hiring, excuse me, we are in an instant feedback world, right? So a question I have to you guys is, what does the internet say about your company, right? You got sites like Glassdoor and stuff like that. So, have you looked at what is your footprint on the internet when folks are looking at, okay, what are folks saying about this organization, right? So again, one of the ways to kind of keep the pulse, word of mouth. Word of mouth has always been important as far as hiring. Most of our clients at BBSI, they're blue collar. It is, really the bread and butter, of how they hire a lot of times is word of mouth. So one of the things, if you don't have it, you might want to consider is, do you have an employee referral program? All right. Most of, if you think about even your friends, right? You hope to think, that your friends hang out with other good people, right? And same thing with your workforce, right? You hope if they're a good worker, then they're going to know other people that are good workers as well. Okay. And lastly, I want to kind of talk about the impact or the co-association of company culture and your brand. Okay. So there is a really good article, Forbes article, that talks about blending brand and how culture can impact the customer experience. So a lot of people think that company culture is just internal to the organization. And I challenge that. It's not just internal. I look at culture as, looking at your brand as a whole. All right. Because I think they go hand in hand. So I want to just ask yourself, think about a company that you just had a recent interaction with, right? Is that interaction going to last a minute, or is it going to last a lifetime? Did that company earn your loyalty, right? And it can be anything from an electrician you called out to the house, to, the Peloton bike that you use, to the Southwest Airlines that you always fly, right? Think about that. So when people have experiences with your organization and with your people, right? What kind of experience are they having? What does that interaction between your employees and the client look like, right? Everything down to from their word choices to the way they're dressed, right? How does that all tie back to your company culture and who you guys are as an organization? So plumbing, a lot of people, let's talk about some of the service industries, right? So there is a plumbing company out there that I think their slogan is, we will show up on time and we will smell good. Okay. So I don't know the people that run this organization. I think if you work backwards, right, you work back from, okay, that's their slogan. They probably identified within that industry that a lot of plumbers maybe aren't dressed so nice. Maybe they don't smell so good, right? And it came back to strategy. It's like saying, look, if we can basically do this, service companies don't show up on time. If we can deliver on this, It's going to set us apart. It's going to grow our business, and it's going to be who we are. Right. So there's a really great example. Now, if those people don't show up on time and they aren't professional, they don't, look nice and smell good, then that really hurts their brand. Right. But think about this too. And this is something, again, I don't know this company, right? But I wouldn't be surprised that if I go into their offices, is everybody in that office wearing polo shirts and khakis? Right? Do they present themselves in a way that might be different than their competition? So again, be the change you want to see. Small things like that can really tie into your brand, tie into the culture, and tie into overall what you guys are trying to accomplish as an organization. And it really is that consistency of experience, right? I think, think about if you guys have ever been to a Hard Rock Cafe. Right? If you go to a Hard Rock Cafe in Orlando and you go to a Hard Rock Cafe in Los Angeles, that experience is going to be very similar, right? Down from the music you hear to the food you eat to the people that take care of you. Well, it's very intentional. There actually is a really good book. Anybody that loves to read, it's called The Culture That Rocks. And actually it was a book that was written by one of the HR heads and really looks at how intentional they are about their hiring process, the thoughtfulness they put into their culture and their brand. So again, if you're looking for a good read, highly recommend The Culture That Rocks. But really the statistics show the number one reason for bad customer, experience is that people don't deliver on their brand promise. And again, talking about so much of that brand promise should be really driven by the company culture and the values and the strategy, all looked into one holistic picture. So what impacts it? All right, there's so many things. I think that's sometimes what's so hard for people to really put the pen on paper as to what company culture is, because there are a lot of things, in my opinion, that really impact it. Okay, and we'll start with, in my opinion, the number one factor, and that is leadership. Okay, because it is, according to statistics, the number one influencer on company culture. All right, so an employee that is rating your company culture and their manager badly, they're 4 more times likely to go look for a job somewhere else. Okay, so one of the questions I'll throw out to you guys to think about is, and whether it be you because you're kind of the head and everybody reports to you, or if you have different leaders underneath you within your organization, think about this is, are mistakes in your organization opportunities, or do failures damage the employee's self-worth? Okay, so when you think about your leadership team, right, how are they interacting with the employees? Okay, do they feel like they're failures, or are they really opportunities to get better? Communication. So I had a college professor one time that said, you cannot not communicate. Okay, so when they have interactions, when you guys have interactions with your teams, interactions with your clients and your customers, what do the word choices, your body language, the tone, the frequency of feedback, what do all those things say about your organization? Okay, so HR professionals were polled, and they actually said that 89% of HR leaders believe feedback and regular check-ins enhance an organization's culture. Okay, so it's really important to have frequent communication. I will say with COVID, I think communication is even more important than ever. Okay, and I'll kind of talk a little bit more about it in the next bullet point here, but do you have something to consider too, is if you have performance reviews, which I am a big fan of performance reviews, okay, but 1/3 of all employees feel that they're unhelpful. All right, so what I might suggest, or you might want to ask yourself is what do those conversations look like? Is the same person delivering all of the performance reviews, or do you have a structured organization where you have different leaders delivering those performance reviews? Okay, if you're an HR professional and you kind of oversee that, right? Do you review all those performance evaluations prior to delivery? Do you have conversations with your leadership about how are they communicating that? Okay. Because again, at the end of the day, and I think the larger the organization is, trying to get that consistency is hard, right? It takes effort. So that's just one thing. If you do performance reviews, which again, I am a big fan of, what do they look like in the way that they're delivered? Are you striving to try to get consistency among your leadership as they deliver that? And then what does goal setting look like, right? So you guys have probably heard the acronym SMART goals, right? So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. It's really important if you guys are doing, performance evaluations, you're providing, IDPs, individual development plans, that the goals that you set, with your employees are really, they're SMART goals. Okay. So for example, let's just say you have a conversation with an employee and they want to upskill and they want to get some forklift training. Okay. So the specific is the forklift training. The measurable is their certificate at the end of the completion of the class. It's attainable because you researched and there's a company 20 minutes down the road that'll do the certification. Realistic, the class is offered, once a month. And then the time bound written in is going to say, okay, the employee is going to obtain the certificate by X date. Okay. It really helps keep everybody accountable versus just saying, oh yeah, that sounds great. Go get go get forklift training. We'll pay for it. Right. It really keeps people accountable to that. It also helps create that consistency. We talked about consistency of experience with your customers. Well, it creates consistency of how your people are treated. Okay. And that's really important as we kind of look a little bit further down here. But the next thing I want to kind of talk about real quick is people interactions. Excuse me. This is the piece where I think COVID probably had the biggest impact on company culture. If you were a highly independent organization, maybe not so much. But there might be some opportunities to improve on your company culture there. But if you guys were highly interdependent, meaning that, a lot of collaboration, people were in the office, you stop by people's desks, you go out to have lunch and to discuss a situation. A lot of that was gone, right? Because so many people moved to remote or hybrid. And there's been some really current research. Actually sat in on a webinar just the other week where the HR Research Institute conducted a study in 2021 and released the results in Q4 last year. And the one question or the one outcome I was really interested in was that it says 60% of people who went to a hybrid or remote model of work during COVID felt that their work-life balance had improved a lot or a little. On the flip side of that, 36% of people said that they felt that the company culture worsened either a little or a lot. So you have folks, it's really interesting, right? Myself included, my work-life balance greatly improved last year with over the last 2 years with COVID, right? But, keeping in mind that because people are now, maybe they were used to being around a lot of people, they're disconnected, right? They feel not only disconnected from their coworkers, they feel disconnected from the organization. And that's where I was talking about more communication, I think is good. Think of ways and try to find ways, and you guys probably at this point, we're 2 years in, have thought about different ways to kind of, if you're still in a remote or hybrid setting, to keep focus on how do we collaborate, right? Being intentional about, having collaboration sessions, trying to get together for virtual coffees or happy hours, right? But I stress, one of the things here that I stress is manage proximity bias. So if you're doing like a hybrid, and you have somebody sitting in your office and you want to run something by somebody, or you want to give somebody a work assignment, be very conscious of, are you always giving those assignments, the better assignments, or always talking with the people that are still in the office? Or are you making a conscious effort to, you know what, Joe's working from home, Susan's working from home. Am I also getting their opinions? Okay. So proximity bias is something that has really, been talked about a lot when it comes to how our employees feeling. How does it reflect back on the company culture? And then, consistency, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but, if you have, and most likely you have like an employee handbook, or you have policies and practices in place, right? You know, are you, or is your leadership team being consistent with that? So for example, if you have a progressive discipline program, are all your leaders, following that, following the policies and the practices you guys have in place? Okay. Because, you treat Joe different than you treat Jim, and Susan different than you treat Robin. That basically, that talking amongst themselves, right, that starts fueling things, right? And that really can have a negative impact on your culture, on the work environment, right? So again, in your leadership meetings, are you guys talking about these things on a consistent basis, so that it gets into your leadership's DNA? On hiring, obviously, we talked about, it's challenging right now to hire. I don't care, what industry you're really in. People are shifting companies, they're changing careers. So one thing I will ask you and to think about is, if you're a company right now that has open positions, right? Are you just hiring a body? Or are you hiring somebody that really fits into your organization and your company culture? And I'll share an example. So when I started working at Progressive, I started handling claims. I started out as a claims adjuster, and I was in California at the time. And we had just gotten back into California, and we were growing. So we had more volume than, we just felt like a hamster in a wheel, right? And they were hiring, they had positions posted, but it felt like, man, the people they were hiring, they were just slowly trickling in, right? And turns out 11 years later, when I left and I looked back, right, on the experiences, I have to say that I never met anybody in that organization that I didn't like. Now, obviously, you get along better with some people than you do others, right? When you look at the certain characteristics of the people that work there, they didn't just hire a body. So again, as you guys, as a leadership team, HR department, really focusing on, hiring the right people. And I know, like I said, it's very challenging, and it's very challenging even more so today. But obviously work environment, focusing on that. The last piece I'm going to talk on, and it's part of our program at BBSI. And I like to talk about this because I think a lot of people think like human capital and risk management, they live in their own silos, right? Again, how people don't think about culture when they think about strategy. So I always encourage people to really take a holistic look at human capital and risk management. Okay, so I often hear, we have a lot of construction clients, and I often hear from them, oh, well, my guys have 40 years experience and they don't pay attention in the toolbox talks, and they don't care about the trainings. And look, my dad was in drywall for 50 years. Like, I get it. But I always challenge them to, okay, but what can we do, right? What can we do differently? And I'm going to share a story with you. I actually looked at a large trash hauler a couple of years ago, and I went through their workers' comp loss claims. And I noticed that they had a ton of tarping injuries. So basically the tarps that go over the garbage trucks. So we got the meeting with the owner. I said, hey, talk to me. I noticed you had a lot of tarping claims. And he goes into this whole thing about, yeah, we tried, and the new technology is expensive and it breaks. And at the end of the day, basically what he was telling me is that the cost of workers' compensation insurance was cheaper than putting in the new equipment to keep the people safe. We walked away. It's the culture. When I look at workers' compensation loss runs, when we do underwriting. It's like, I see people with litigated claims and I'm like, well, why are they suing you? Right? So it all goes back to company culture, how people feel like they're being treated. And, I often talk to my clients about, when they say, oh, well, nobody will pay attention. And I challenge them. I said, look, when you guys have these meetings, do you kind of start the meetings by saying, look, like, you guys are important. We want you to go back to your families the same way that you came in this morning, right? Making them feel like you care. Another thing I'll ask you is, does your workers' compensation carrier have a nurse triage line so that if one of your employees does get hurt, outside a 911 situation, do they feel in that moment they're being taken care of right now? Yes, there's strategy behind it from a business sense of keeping the claim costs down, all these other things, right? But just as equal is how your employees feeling in that moment. Do you have a return, light duty return to work program? Again, taking care of your people. Also, there is a strategy with reducing costs too, right? So a lot of these things, you want to do the right thing by your employee, and by doing the right thing by your employee actually can help the bottom line. So just some things, different things to think about. Again, that's what I'm saying. There's so many things that can impact company culture. And you really want to have a pulse on a lot of these things. All right. So when I work with clients that want to focus on company culture, actually, one of the things that I do ahead of time is I actually give them a list of, it's about 40 questions or so that I want them to take a look at and review and kind of think about before we even kind of get down and sit down and talk. Okay. So what I did was I just shared, obviously I kind of sprinkled various questions in the earlier part of the presentation, right? But these are some things that you guys can think about, and think about, what does this look like in your organization today? Have you guys ever asked these questions as a leadership team, right? So, what would you say are the observable characteristics of your company culture? What do you think that your employees and customers would say? Again, does your leadership team buy in? I like this one. Are the company's results due to muscling the business or nurturing a positive culture? Turnover rate's huge, right? We talked about retention. That's one of the things that I'll look at too. I mean, usually, turnover rates, are linked to company culture. How do your employees interact with each other when nobody's looking, right? No customers are looking, right? I had a CEO, one of the companies I work for, always used to say, who are you when nobody's looking, right? So if one of your employees would never swear in front of a client, but yet they're in the lunchroom, saying all the, it's like, is that behavior aligned with the company culture and the values, right? So, and then, do your employees freely provide feedback and discuss issues with you? I mean, the old term was probably, open door policy, right? I mean, do you think that your employees feel that they can provide feedback to you guys? All right. And at the end of the day, are your employees just going through the motions, right? Or are they connected to your organization and what you guys are trying to accomplish? Are you attracting good talent? Or are you kind of pushing that away? So let's talk a little bit about, now, we went through all that prior. So let's talk about how it might be able to be shifted. And again, I can't emphasize enough, right? Be the change you guys want to see, right? If company culture is, if you guys don't have a strong company culture within your organization, it starts with each one of us, right? It starts with, the leadership team and everybody, being that change that they want to see. But I always tell people, look, I mean, this change, it doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes time. too many changes. I mean, if you try to implement so much stuff, it could actually hurt the organization. And I will tell you, a lot of times, companies think that they can just fix the company culture by throwing a bunch of different benefits at people. Well, and it's actually down here, the last bullet point, employee survey or suggestion box. Well, if you don't know if that's what your employees really want, then that might not do anything at all, and it might just cost you more money, right? So I should probably put this at the top. I am a huge fan of employee surveys or suggestion boxes, okay? But you also see what I have in parentheses there. Be prepared to act, okay? Because again, we talked earlier about people talking amongst themselves. If you do a survey and you don't kind of share the results or no action kind of comes of it, then it's like, oh, you try doing a survey months later and they're like, well, they didn't do anything from the other survey that they did, right? Again, how does those experiences, make the employees feel, right? Again, it all drives and is part of that company culture. So again, big fan of employee surveys. I just, highly be ready to act on something that they put in there. And again, it doesn't have to be, these things that we're talking about can be no cost or very low cost, right? I understand that small businesses and profit margins, they're not, they're only a few percent sometimes, right? So it's like, and that's why it's crazy that people just want to throw benefits at people. Well, it's like, well, hang on a second. Is that really going to make an impact, right? So let's talk about some things here. A note, just a handwritten thank you note, right? Or an acknowledgement of a meeting of, how one employee helped another, or, a great review that came in from a customer, okay? Those things don't cost anything. Items of gratitude. I'll give you an example. So the former president of KFC, right? He used to hand out rubber chickens for good performance. Okay. Now, obviously chickens, right? It aligns with their product. And it became this whole thing where everybody wanted to get these rubber chickens. So, maybe find something that is unique to your organization, right? I can tell you, I had an employer one time, they sent a coin. It's probably in a drawer somewhere, or it got thrown away, right? Or plaques, look, they're great to acknowledge, but maybe an item of gratitude that is ongoing and is really tied to your organization that gets people excited that they're being recognized. Okay. Family fund. If you're an organization that offers vacations, basically where people, if there's an emergency. So I had a coworker at Progressive who, her husband came down with cancer and she really needed to spend time with him. And we were able to donate our PTO to a family fund that she could use so that she didn't have to, go unpaid, right? So it's this whole idea of building, a sense of family, right? A sense of community within the organization. Community Day, really great when you talk about, volunteering, right? Again, thinking about if you're a trade, right? Could you partner with Habitat for Humanity, right? Maybe the whole office can't go, but maybe, one team could go this month and another team goes next quarter, right? And you're basically paying them for their skills in the community. It's good for your brand getting out there. But it also makes them feel good, right? Because they're giving back to the community that you guys are a part of. So again, not a lot of cost associated there. You can get some personal good feelings out of it. And again, it's good kind of publicity into the brand, right? But it all kind of goes together what you're trying to accomplish. A safety incentive program, that kind of, goes to the workers' comp piece. If you have maybe safety committees are also another great thing to form. If you guys don't have one of those, basically the employees kind of keep each other, accountable. Just for example, I worked with a very large framing company and they had some issues to the point where like the guy was carrying the nail gun and tripped over something and shot his coworker in the leg with a nail gun. Okay. It's like, okay, time out. So we formed this safety committee that basically, they kind of police themselves, but right, they really were concerned about each other, how they went home. And then at the end of the quarter, sometimes they brought a taco truck. Sometimes they put a little bonus into the paycheck, right? So safety incentive programs, safety committees are great, depending on the size of the organization, maybe the type of, the type of industry you're in. Another big one is mentoring program. Entrepreneur Magazine basically stated that a study found that promoting mentoring and continuous learning boosts retention by 90%. So mentoring, upskilling, continuous education, I group them all into one, because you're basically helping better your employee, right? Or if you're a larger organization where maybe you have somebody in HR that's interested in marketing or vice versa, and you can partner with somebody in that other department to, hey, look, this is one of their goals, right? And kind of helping them reach those. That goes back to performance reviews, that goes back to individual development plans. It kind of all ties together. So hopefully, connecting the dots here. Potentially redesigning your onboarding program. And when I say that, it's like, are you are the new employees really engaged in your values, in your culture? Is that throughout the onboarding stage, is that known, right? So you might want to take a look at your onboarding program. Diversity committees, obviously, that's been a hot topic, lately. But, can you form a diversity committee, right? Regular team meetings and outings. I know, obviously, COVID, but, outside, the spring, can you do a picnic, right? Are you able to meet on a regular basis with either your smaller team or overall larger as an organization? One of the other things that I'm a big fan of, and it's not just for company culture. I mean, it's just the whys behind things, right? If you could tell the why, it's such a big part of change management that, if you can provide the whys behind something, if you're making process changes, are you, showing and telling your employees and giving them the knowledge, hey, this is why we're doing it. So hopefully they have a desire and then they can act upon it. Okay. But sometimes, there was a big change in my organization that happened last year, and it just kind of got rolled out. And I'm like, was there any conversation about how this might impact the employees? Okay. So whys are really great. Little surprises, that can be anything. You guys bring in, pizza on a Friday, donuts on a Wednesday, something out of the box thinking. It again, when I talk about being in the DNA, I had a friend of mine who this was just a few weeks ago. Apparently the heat in their building wasn't working right. Her boss came in and turned on, each office has their own little space heater. He came in and turned on everybody's space heaters. So when they got to the office that morning, they wouldn't be super cold, right? The offices were warmed up. How nice was that, right? And that again is just these little different things, that really do make. She shared it on LinkedIn. We had a conversation about it. It's like, oh my God, again, it really had an impact on me. And I'm sure, you multiply that, right? I'm telling the story, right? So, little surprises, they don't have to cost a fortune. I think the big key is, okay, connect it to your company, connect it to your culture. All right. And, just work at it, continue, and then they'll become the chickens at KFC. Okay. So, just different things to think about. And with that, I'm pretty much wrapped up the presentation. I guess, final thoughts, like I said, making sure that you guys are taking a holistic approach to, when you're looking at strategy, also making sure that you're talking about company culture and everything and processes you do, making sure you kind of keep a pulse on it because it's not stagnant, and maybe looking to do, add a couple things to maybe, shift or improve your company culture. And I will stop sharing. There we go.
Great. Thanks so much, Tammy. I learned so much incredible information in a short period of time. So, thank you. Now, we do have some time to open.
Chrissy, I think you're breaking up there.
let me jump in because
Yeah.
coming through. It sounds like we've got time for a little Q&A. Did anybody have any questions? Well, I've got one. Tammy, how did you get started in this industry doing this? There's usually a pretty cool backstory.
So interesting enough, I left Progressive. I went to do my master's, and I got a headhunter came, and I ended up starting as business partner at BBSI. So really working with business owners. And when you talk about reducing exposure, liability, talking about their growth strategies, right? Company culture was just something that I feel really passionate about. I think that it really, from an HR perspective, can have a positive influence on people's lives, like your employees, but it can also really impact and have a positive, impact on the organization. So it really was, I took the position and I started talking to a ton of business owners and working with them on developing, current state, future state KPIs, right? And we started talking about it, and I just started to learn about their businesses. And I think as a consultant too, it's for me, and that's why I had so many questions like sprinkled in through the conversation. A lot of times I always feel as a consultant, it's sometimes just asking the business owners or their team the right questions, right? To get them thinking. But yeah, that's kind of the backstory. It's just really been a passion of mine. And I just see the impact it really can have, both on employees and the organizations.
Hey, Tammy, I got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
When it comes to, rewarding employees and doing stuff for them, how do you manage the part between it being a reward and then it becoming an expectation?
Yeah, great. And that would be something I probably want to dig a little bit deeper into, maybe what you're currently doing, right? But, on the surface, I would always ask, well, how is it being presented? Right? Is it something that is like an annual bonus at the end of the year? How did it kind of take shape? Right? How did it get to be, something that you're doing on a quarterly or annual basis? And could you change it up? Right? So I don't know if you want to shed any more light to kind of give me a little bit more background.
It's like if the guys go out and we got a big job going on and we're kind of pressed to get it done. We bring it in, on time, everything's the way it should be. Everybody's done their job, what they were hired for. And say on a Friday, you want to hand the guys each say, hey, here's a $50 gift card. We had a good, this job was good. Go take your spouse or significant other out to dinner, enjoy yourself.
Yeah, that is great. And I think, probably part of that is going back to that communication and how, you or your teams are messaging that and saying, shaking their hands and saying, great job. We don't do this all the time, you know what I mean? But in this particular case, because, it helps the company, you are assets to our company. And you know what I mean? So it seems like you're doing, look, I love it. I mean, it's a wonderful thing you're doing for your employees, and saying, look, you really helped us here, right? It's not maybe on every job, this isn't the case, right? But on these special occasions where you guys stepped up, we want to make sure that you're rewarded for that. And then, maybe what I would say is these little surprises, right? So I don't know if you have little surprises along the way, but then that might kind of mix it up a little bit. You know what I mean? So instead of them waiting for maybe a job to end, maybe you take, pizza out on, are you in construction? Are you in the field?
Yeah, in construction, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe it's, dropping off pizzas or, like as we come up on the summer, if, dropping off some extra Gatorades, right? Or doing something, kind of mixing it up a little bit, to add in a little surprises there. So it's maybe they don't just count on that. Oh, well, we never know what's coming. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I love it. I do love it. I mean, that,
and then sometimes there's jobs where it's just one of those things where, it's over budget, things have happened on a job, weird, strange things have happened and you can't do it. And they're like, well, we did our job. It was on time, but where's our bonus now?
Yeah, right. And I think that kind of goes back to that why, being really honest and transparent with the employees and, really recognizing that, yes, maybe, look, this one came in over budget or something happened here, but we really appreciate everything you do, right? And when those opportunities do arise where we can give back to you, we're definitely going to do that. But if they understand kind of the whys behind all of that, and you're doing things like that to treat them well, hopefully they will appreciate that. But I would say maybe just sprinkle in some things here and there that maybe they're not expecting, and maybe I'll keep them on their toes a little bit.
All right.
Great, thank you. Can you all hear me now?
Yeah, I think you're good.
Yeah, okay. Daryl has his hand up. Do you want to ask your question, Daryl? Good morning.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. This is very helpful because I actually am in communications, and a lot of times this work actually falls on communications department. So with that being said, I had a question for you. For new leaders who are coming into a newer organization, or for startup companies who are doing this work for the first time, do you suggest that HR departments facilitate and push this kind of work, or should it be a team kind of a concept for new leaders and then new businesses? How do you suggest even starting this work?
Man, there's a lot in that question. So I would say that I'm always a big fan of team collaboration. It kind of goes back to that mentoring. If you're bringing somebody new on, can they have an opportunity to learn through that discussion process? Some executive coaching or just some coaching, business coaching in general. One of the things I didn't touch on today that I think is really important to think about is that as businesses grow, right? I've seen it so much in construction, manufacturing, transportation, where the companies grow and they want to take somebody that, is used to, putting in the window or building the widget or driving the truck. And now all of a sudden you're transitioning them into a leadership position, right? They might be really good at what they do, but their skill set might be lacking in some of these other areas that we talked about, right? So I really encourage, folks that might be new, to seek out, our HR professionals will work with, our owners on that. And I call it succession planning. People always think about succession as selling the business. No, I think about succession as like, what's your bench strength, right? And moving those people up. Most of the times it's always good to hire within and promote within. So how do you make sure that they're put in a good position in order to do that? But Daryl, to answer your question, I always think a team approach is good. So if you have, excuse me, guys, if you have multiple people within your organization, get them together, the meeting of the minds. And if you have, really some good folks that have a lot of great experience, if you're bringing somebody up, that's a great way. They're going to be like a sponge. And it allows you to kind of mold them the way that you want. But being really conscious, as a communication professional, being very, aware of word choices, body language, the style of delivery, it's really, really important.
Got it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have time for one last question. If anybody has anything they'd like to add, any comments or questions before we close?
You know what? I did not put my information in the chat. So feel free, I'm a member of the chamber. If you guys have any questions or want to have any follow-up conversations, feel free to reach out. So let me put that in here right now.
Yeah, following the event, we will share Tammy's contact information so you can stay in touch with her.
Okay.
We will also share the contact information that everyone added into the chat with each other so you can stay in touch if you'd like.
Tammy, will you be sharing your slides that we can send them out as well?
You know what? We can take that offline if you don't mind.
Okay,
but the recording, I believe, though, would have them as well. If you're gonna, you planning on releasing the recording?
Yes, we'll send that out to our attendees.
Yeah.
Okay. Any final questions? Last call. No? Okay, well, thank you.
Donuts tomorrow.
Oh, go ahead, Barry.
Who's bringing the donuts tomorrow?
Ray. We volunteer. Ray will bring it in.
Thank you, Tammy. That was great.
Yes, it was.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day.
Okay. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. This has been a great session, and we do hope you'll tune into our future webinars. We try to have at least one, sometimes two a month, but you can find our schedule on centralmarylandchamber.org on our website. So thank you again to Tammy and the entire team of BBSI for all you do and for this informative and really helpful presentation. As I mentioned, we will forward out Tammy's contact information as well as the recorded video, so you can stay in touch and watch the video again if you have follow-up questions or if you missed anything. So thank you all again, and we hope to see you soon in person. Have a great day.